The blade of the pocket scissors caught the light for a moment, a silver flash, before Officer Harlan closed them around the last of my locks and cut. I heard the sound, that dry, soft crunch of something irreversible. The long locks I had grown dropped onto the asphalt of a gas station parking lot, while his partner stood with one hand resting on his holster as if I were dangerous. I didn't say a word. Not yet. But I remember their badge numbers, and later, I looked up from my bench and saw their faces staring back at me from the defense table. But let me start from the beginning, because nothing about that night made sense unless you understood what that hair meant to me and what kind of woman they thought they were dealing with. I'd started growing my locks the same year I passed the bar. My mother had warned me. "Talia," she said, pressing her lips together the way she did when choosing words carefully. "You know what they're going to say at interviews, at the firm." I had looked at her in the bathroom mirror, her pressed hair, her careful blouse, her whole life spent making herself palatable. And I had said quietly, "Let them say it." That was years ago. I'd grown my locks into many thick ones, each one heavy and deliberate as a statement. I oiled them every Sunday with rosemary and coconut oil my grandmother had taught me, the smell rising in the bathroom like a prayer. They reached the middle of my back. I was a sitting judge of the 13th District Court, and I had not been late to a session in years. First in my family to go to law school, graduated second in my class at Howard. Time in the public defender's office. The years that taught me what the law looked like when it wasn't working for the people it was supposed to serve. Then a seat on the bench as one of the youngest judges appointed to the 13th District in decades, one of 4 black women currently serving on that court. I knew what I represented. I knew it every time I put on my robe, and I carried that weight without complaint. My apartment was quiet and ordered. Books arranged by subject. A framed photograph of my grandmother above my desk. She in her nursing uniform from decades past, chin up, eyes forward. I talked to that photograph more than I talked to most people. "I'm handling it, Grandma." I would say some mornings. Sometimes I believed it. The morning of the incident was unremarkable in all the ways that matter. Full docket, a sentencing, 2 motions, a juvenile disposition that always ran long. My clerk, Lena, left briefings on my desk with a cup of tea I hadn't asked for, but always appreciated. "Long one today?" she said from the doorway, glasses pushed up on her forehead. "Is there another kind?" I said, and she laughed. And the morning began. It was the small thing at lunch that I would think about later. I was eating a sandwich at my desk when my phone buzzed with a news alert. A robbery in Sycamore Heights. Suspect described as a black woman in her 30s or 40s, medium height, dark-colored sedan. I read it, registered it the way you register weather in a city you don't live in, and went back to work. My car was dark blue. I drove through Sycamore Heights on the way home. Neither fact seemed relevant in the afternoon. They would be entirely relevant that night. The session ran until late. By the time I said goodnight to Randolph at the lobby desk, he always waved with 2 fingers like a small salute, and walked to the parking structure. My feet ached with the bone-deep exhaustion of sustained, absolute attention. My locks were pinned in a low knot, held with a tortoiseshell clip my mother had given me for my birthday. I got into my car and began the drive home. I noticed a police cruiser shortly after I turned onto Callaway Avenue, the main artery through Sycamore Heights. It fell in behind me, 2 car lengths back. I noticed it the way you notice a shadow. I was driving under the speed limit. I had been doing that in certain neighborhoods since I was young, since my father had gripped my shoulder before I got my license and said, in his most careful voice, "You know what to do if you see lights." I did know. I'd always known. The cruiser stayed with me through several traffic lights. Something in my chest had begun to hum at a frequency that had nothing to do with sound. A tightening, an animal awareness. The body's surveillance system activating before the mind catches up. When the lights went on, red and blue strobing in my mirrors, I pulled into a gas station on the right, because that was the rule. A lit, public space, always somewhere with witnesses. I turned off the engine, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and waited. There were two of them. The first approached the driver's side, white, wide across the shoulders, the kind of face never required to work hard to be believed. Name tag, Harlan. He shone the flashlight directly in my face before he spoke, which is a technique, not a courtesy. License and registration, he said. No good evening. No, ma'am. Of course. My courtroom voice measured clear with no edge in it. My registration is in the glove compartment. License is in my bag on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for them now. Slowly, he said. I held them out the window. He took them without looking at me and walked back to the cruiser. The second officer, Becker, stayed at my rear bumper with one hand resting on his belt, not writing anything, just watching. The gas station attendant inside the lit booth had put his phone down and was watching too. A young man in a red vest, still and alert in the way of someone who understands exactly what they're seeing. They took much longer than necessary for a check that should have been quick. Harlan came back and leaned down to my window level, arms braced on the doorframe, body angled into my space. Do you know why I stopped you tonight? I do not, I said, because I didn't. I had broken no law. Robbery in this neighborhood earlier. Suspect is a black female, 30s to 40s, dark sedan. He let the pause breathe. You match the description. I looked at him. The description you gave applies to several 100,000 women in this city, I said, still even. His jaw shifted. Step out of the vehicle, he said. Everything in my body went still. Not cold. Still. The way water goes still before the temperature drops below freezing. I knew my rights with the specificity of someone who had spent years applying them. I also knew that knowing your rights and exercising them safely are two completely different things, and the distance between them is one of the oldest injustices in this country. I got out of the car. They had me stand at the hood. Becker came around to my left. Harlan said they were conducting a search in connection with the robbery. I asked if I was being detained or free to go. Detained, he said. On what grounds? Reasonable suspicion. Officer, I said very quietly, I would like to know specifically what articulable facts support that suspicion. He looked at me with an expression I'd seen in courtrooms more times than I could count. The expression of a person accustomed to deference encountering, for the first time, its deliberate and complete absence. He asked where I was coming from. I said, work. He asked what kind. I said legal work. I did not say, I am a judge, not yet. I was watching him the way I watch witnesses on the stand, not for what they said, but for where the words didn't land correctly, for the micro-movement in the face before it decided what expression to wear. I was building a record in my mind, precise and documented, because I had learned long ago that memory is the first form of evidence. He told me to face the hood, hands flat. Becker conducted the search with a thoroughness that had nothing to do with finding a robbery suspect. When it was finished, I straightened my blazer with 2 careful movements and looked at Harlan. He was looking at my hair, my locks, partially loose from the clip during the search, hanging over one shoulder. He was looking at them with the expression of someone who has already decided a thing needs to be managed. "These are a concern," he said. The words landed with the flat, impossible weight of something that makes no sense and simultaneously makes terrible, perfect sense. "Excuse me," I said. "Could be concealing items." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a pair of compact folding scissors, silver, the kind clipped to a multi-tool or kept in a first aid kit. He opened them. "I need to check." The world rearranged itself in the moments it took me to fully understand what he was saying. Something hot moved up through my sternum toward my throat, and the cold closed over it. The training, the discipline, the absolute certainty that if I reacted with anything other than perfect stillness in that parking lot, I would be the one in handcuffs. That was what he was counting on. "That is not a recognized search procedure," I said. My voice did not waver by a single degree. "I do not consent." "I'm not asking for consent. It's a safety measure." Becker had shifted closer to my left. The young man in the red vest was on his feet now in his booth, watching. Harlan took the first lock between his fingers. That contact, a stranger's hand closing around something grown from my body over the years, something oiled every Sunday morning with my grandmother's recipe, sent ice down from my scalp through my shoulders into my hands, and I pressed my palms flat against the hood of the car and held on. The scissors made their sound, a dry, precise crunch. Air against the back of my neck where there had been weight. The locks fell onto the asphalt in the orange light of the parking lot, each landing with a softness that was almost polite, as if any of this was careful. I stood with my hands on the hood, and did not move, and did not speak, and held everything in a place so deep it had no name, because I knew, with the bone certainty of years in law, that composure was the only weapon I had in this parking lot, and I was not going to surrender it. Then I said, without raising my voice by a single degree, "Officer Harlan, badge number 4712, I need you to stop." He stopped. Not because I had said it, because of my tone. That specific register that is not anger, not volume, but pure, concentrated authority. The tone I had spent years building in a room where my words determined what happened to other people's lives. He lowered the scissors and looked at me differently than he had moments before, not with respect, with the first tremor of uncertainty. "We're done here," he said, as if it had been his choice all along. They returned my license and registration. No citation, no arrest, no suspect found. I looked at the ground, at the locks lying on the asphalt. I bent and picked them up. I don't know why, some instinct older than reason, the impulse to hold the pieces of something broken, even when you know they can't be restored. I wrapped them in a receipt from my bag and put them in my pocket, got into my car. I sat for some time without starting the engine. The rain had started, light and sideways, ticking against the glass. Then I got out, walked into the gas station, and asked the young man in the red vest whether the security cameras covered the lot. He stared at me, then quietly, "Yeah, they do. And I got it on my phone, too." His name was Jamal, studying graphic design. His business card had a small logo he'd made himself, neat and deliberate. He said, "I saw everything. Whatever you need." I thanked him. I drove home at exactly the speed limit. At my kitchen table, with the locks in their folded receipt in front of me, I opened my laptop and began to type, methodically, precisely, the way I write findings. Date, time, location, sequence of events, exact words in the exact order they were spoken, badge numbers, names. I wrote for some time without stopping. Later that night, I searched the public records database. Officer Daniel Harlan, veteran of the Ridgecrest Police Department, Currently on administrative leave pending a departmental misconduct review. Case number listed. I noted it. Then Officer Carl Becker. No prior disciplinary record. I opened my court calendar. There, filed days ago and assigned by random rotation, was a case I had not yet opened. Ridgecrest Police Department. Administrative Misconduct Appeal. Respondents: Harlan, D., and Becker. C. Assigned Judge: the Honorable Talia L. Brooks, 13th District Court. I read it several times. Then I sat back in my chair with my hands folded in my lap and listened to the rain for a very long time. They had cut the wrong woman's hair. I looked at my grandmother's photograph. She looked back with her steady eyes, certain, already knowing. I said, very quietly, "I'm handling it, Grandma." This time, I believed every word. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, laid down, stared at the ceiling, listened to the rain, and then I gave up and went back to my laptop. Something about the case number for Harlan's misconduct review was pulling at me, a thread I hadn't yet followed to its end. I opened the full public filing. The review had been initiated months ago. Complainant: unnamed. Case sealed at the departmental level, pending administrative review. The filing officer was Lieutenant Raymond Hayes, Harlan's direct supervisor. I noted that. Then I searched Hayes's name alongside Harlan's in the department's public disciplinary index. There were prior complaints against Harlan in recent years. Both had been closed at the supervisory level before reaching formal review. Both had been signed off by the same name, Lieutenant Raymond Hayes. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened a new document and wrote Hayes's name at the top. I went to bed later. I lay in the dark and thought about the word suppressed, what it meant in a legal context, what it meant in a human one. I thought about the unnamed complainant in the sealed file. I thought about the closed complaints and one supervisor's signature closing them, and I thought about the particular, practiced ease with which Harlan had reached into his jacket for those scissors, as if he had never once been made to answer for anything he had done with his hands. That ease was not an accident. That ease was the product of years of being told, "Nothing will happen to you." I was about to change that equation. The first call I made the next morning was to Nia Okoro. We had been friends since our first year at Howard. She had gone into civil rights litigation when I had gone into criminal defense, and we had spent years disagreeing about strategy and agreeing about everything that mattered. She answered on the second ring, already in her office, already with coffee, already from the sound of her voice, in the middle of something. "I need some time," I said. A pause. "Talia, it's early. I know what time it is. I need some time." I heard her set something down. "Talk." I told her everything. The drive home. Callaway and Marsh. Badge numbers. The scissors. The locks on the asphalt in the gas station light. Jamal in his red vest. And the footage on his phone. The closed complaints and Hayes's signature. The case on my docket. When I finished, there was a silence on the line that was not empty. It was the specific silence of someone organizing what they have just heard into categories of what it means and what can be done about it. "How are you?" Nia asked first. Not, "What are we going to do?" "How are you?" I looked at the receipt on my kitchen table, still folded around the locks. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm better than fine. I'm focused." "Okay," she said. "Then here's what I need you to do. I need you to send me every word of that incident report tonight. I need Jamal's contact information. I need those badge numbers in writing. And Talia," she paused, "you cannot be the judge on that case. You know that." "I know that," I said. "I'm not planning to be. What are you planning? I looked at my grandmother's photograph. I'm planning to recuse myself on the record, in open court, with a full statement. Another silence. Then Nia said very quietly, Oh, that is elegant. I have a few other ideas too, I said. I thought you might. Send me the report. I'll call the state AG's office by midday. I sent her the report. Days later, I received an email through my court's public contact form. The name in the sender field was Patrice Washington. The subject line read, I think the same thing happened to me. I read it twice, then printed it, then called my clerk and told her I needed some time before the morning session. I sat at my desk and read it a third time. Patrice was a high school chemistry teacher. Months ago, she had been stopped by a Ridgecrest PD cruiser 2 blocks from her home while walking back from a late parent-teacher conference. She had been detained for some time on suspicion of matching a description that, as she noted in her email with the dry precision of a woman who had been over this many times, fit approximately every black woman walking in that district after dark. During the search, the officer, she described him as white, 30s, broad, with a name tag beginning with H, had taken hold of her braids, and, quoting her directly, cut some of them off with something from his pocket. He said it was protocol. She had filed a formal complaint with the department. Weeks later, she had received a letter from Lieutenant Raymond Hayes informing her that the complaint had been reviewed and found to have insufficient basis for further action. The letter was attached to the email. I stared at Hayes's signature at the bottom of it. The same signature, the same practiced loop of ink, the same careful bureaucratic absolution, and something went very still inside me. Not the fearful stillness of the parking lot, something colder and more permanent. I forwarded the email to Nia, then I forwarded it to the State Attorney General's investigator who had opened a preliminary inquiry days prior. Then I wrote back to Patrice Washington and told her that her complaint had not been lost, that it had not been forgotten, and that someone was now paying very close attention. She replied soon after, Thank you. I thought I was alone in this. You were never alone in this. I just hadn't found you yet. In the days leading up to the hearing, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, from the particular focused energy that comes when you have done the preparation and you are simply waiting for the moment to arrive. I had submitted my recusal motion to the Chief Judge as procedure required. I had written the statement I intended to read into the record, and I had read it every morning since, not to memorize it, but to test it. To find any word that was imprecise, any sentence that could be softened or disputed or dismissed. I found none. The statement was, as Nia called it when I read it to her over the phone, surgical. The night before the hearing, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't drink, and the receipt still folded in front of me. I had kept it there all this time. The locks inside had dried now, lighter than I remembered, curled slightly at the ends. I thought about the Sunday mornings, the rosemary oil, the smell of it. I thought about my grandmother's hands moving through my mother's hair in an old photograph I kept in a shoebox in the closet. I thought about what it means to carry something in your body that other people have decided to have opinions about, and what it means, finally, to stop explaining yourself to those people and simply show them what you know. I looked at the grandmother photograph. The eyes, the nursing uniform, the chin up. I said, tomorrow. She already knew. I arrived at the courthouse early on the day of the hearing. Lena was already at her desk, coffee in hand, and she looked at me when I walked in with the particular attention of someone who had known me long enough to read the difference between my faces. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better than okay," I said. "Pull up the full session record for this morning. I want everything documented from the moment court is called to order. She nodded without asking why. That was one of the things I valued most about Lena. She understood that some questions were better answered by watching. The courtroom was fuller than it should have been for a departmental appeal. Word had moved through the building the way word always moves, quietly, through the ventilation of shared offices and courthouse hallways, that something was happening in Brooks's courtroom this morning. Harlan and Becker sat at the defense table with their union attorney, a man named Moretti, who had a reputation for aggressive motions and an impressive win record in departmental appeals. Moretti was leaning toward Harlan and speaking in a low voice, and Harlan was nodding with the confidence of someone who believed today was a formality. Becker sat slightly apart from them, and when I walked in, something in his expression shifted. A flicker, a contraction, a recognition he couldn't entirely suppress. I took the bench. The room went still. I looked out at it for a moment, at Moretti, at Harlan with his confident hands flat on the table, at Becker, who would not hold my eyes, at the gallery behind them where I recognized two faces, Nia Okoro in the third row with a leather portfolio on her lap and her expression deliberately neutral, and beside her, in a gray coat, Patrice Washington, her braids pinned carefully around the gaps where some of them used to be. I opened the folder in front of me. Before this court addresses the matter of Ridgecrest PD versus the 13th District Review Board, I said in my full courtroom voice, the one that carries to every corner without being raised, I am entering into the record a formal recusal motion, which I will now read in its entirety. Moretti's head came up. Harlan's did too. I read it, every word. I read the date, the time, the location, the parking lot of the Quick Trip gas station at the corner of Callaway and Marsh. I read the name Harlan and badge number. I read the name Becker and badge number. I read the description of the stop, the stated grounds of reasonable suspicion, the extended license check, the search I had not consented to and been subjected to regardless. I read, with complete precision and no inflection of emotion whatsoever, the moment Officer Daniel Harlan had taken compact folding scissors from his jacket pocket and cut some of my locks from my head while I stood with my hands on the hood of my own car in a public parking lot. And I read the words, "I do not consent." And I read his response, verbatim, "I'm not asking for consent. It's a safety measure." I read the name of the witness, Jamal, the footage on his phone. I read the prior complaints against Officer Harlan, closed at the supervisory level by Lieutenant Raymond Hayes. I read the letter sent to Patrice Washington, chemistry teacher, informing her that her complaint, describing an incident materially identical to my own, had been found to have insufficient basis for further action. I read Hayes's signature. The courtroom was completely silent. Moretti had stopped writing. The union attorney's pen was resting on the table, and his hand was not moving. Harlan's confident expression had undergone a transformation I'd watched before, in defendants on the stand. In the moment they understand that the ground beneath them has changed, and there is no version of the next minutes that goes the way they planned. I closed the folder. Because I am a material witness to the conduct of the named respondents, I said, I am recusing myself from this matter with immediate effect. The recusal statement will be entered in full as a matter of public record. A copy has been transmitted to the State Attorney General's office, where a formal investigation under Section 14 of the State Law Enforcement Accountability Act was opened recently. I looked at Harlan for a moment, just long enough for him to know that I was choosing to look at him, that it was not discomfort or accident. "This court is adjourned," I said. I stood. I gathered my folder. I walked off the bench. Behind me, I heard the gallery break, not loudly, a wave of breath, of movement, of whispered exchanges that built in the way a tide builds. From nothing to everything, without a single moment you can point to as the start. I heard Moretti's voice, sharp with urgency, and I heard Harlan say something I could not make out, and I heard very clearly the sound of Nia Okoro's heels as she stood up in the third row. Lena was waiting in the corridor outside the back entrance. She had a cup of coffee in one hand and was looking at me with the expression of someone who has just watched something they are going to remember. "How'd it go?" she asked, which was Lena's way of saying, "I know exactly how it went." "It went," I said. I took the coffee. It was the right temperature, which meant she had started making it the moment I began reading. That was what years of working together looked like. The coffee at the right temperature. The documentation already running. The people beside you who simply know. The investigation moved in the way investigations move when there is clear evidence, public record, and a state AG who has an election coming up and no interest in being on the wrong side of history. The sealed complainant in Harlan's prior case was identified within weeks. Her name was Angela Morales, and she had been stopped and had her hair touched. Harlan had not cut that time, but had searched them thoroughly against her stated objection and had told her, when she asked for his badge number, "That's not information you need." Her complaint had been closed quickly. Hayes had signed off rapidly. Hayes was placed on administrative leave soon after. His personnel file, subpoenaed by the AG, contained documentation of multiple complaints over the years, most of which had been closed at his level with no formal investigation. Harlan was terminated later. His departmental appeal rendered moot by the state proceeding. Criminal charges, official oppression, civil rights violation, falsification of records were filed. Becker resigned. His resignation was accepted. Moretti appeared on a local news segment and described the situation as a case of administrative miscommunication and procedural misstep. Nia appeared on the same channel the following evening and spent time methodically dismantling that description with documentary evidence. I watched it at home with tea, and I laughed for the first time in months. A real laugh, the kind that starts somewhere honest. Patrice Washington and I met for lunch later at a small Ethiopian restaurant near the courthouse. She had regrown some of the cut braids by then. She wore them without apology, pinned back from her face. And when we sat down, she looked at me across the table and said, "I kept thinking no one would believe me." "I believed you," I said. "I believed you the moment I read your email. After a lot of people would have just cut them all," I said. "Yeah, I thought about it. Because they were mine," I said. "They were mine before that night, and they were mine after it. I wasn't going to let what happened in that parking lot be the thing that decided what I did with my own hair for the rest of my life." She considered that. Then she smiled slowly, like someone arriving somewhere they had been trying to reach. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, that's right." By spring, my locks had grown from where Harlan had cut them, uneven at the ends. I'd had a lock artist trim and shape them after it happened, the first time I'd been to a salon since, and I'd sat in the chair and watched in the mirror as she worked, and I had not flinched. The new growth was there, stubborn and quiet and entirely unbothered, the way living things grow when given the chance. One morning, I woke early before the alarm. I made coffee, 2 cups, black, standing at the kitchen counter in the gray morning quiet. I looked at the tortoiseshell clip on the edge of the counter, the one my mother had given me, the one I had worn the night of the stop. I had not worn it since. I picked it up, held it for a moment, feeling the smooth tortoise patterning under my thumb. Then I pinned back my locks with it, carefully, and looked in the mirror. I went to work. On my desk that morning, under Lena's tea and the day's briefings, was a handwritten note from Chief Judge Harlan. Statement entered into the record. Clean work, Talia. 3 words did not constitute adequate recognition of what had happened, and Chief Judge Harlan was not a man given to adequate recognition, but it was something. I folded it and put it in my desk drawer. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the morning docket, and got to work. The photograph of my grandmother watched me from the wall, she in her nursing uniform, chin up. The same photograph that had been there every morning for years. Through sentencings and motions and juvenile dispositions and all the long, ordinary, necessary work of holding a thing in place so that it does not fall. I did not speak to it that morning. I didn't need to. She already knew I was handling it.